keep seeing the same script over and over and over again. This is nothing new. Where are your brains? Like, completely lost its moral compass.
What's your opinion about global opinion of how the globe has responded, the world has responded to Israel? I'm curious if you're surprised. There's been a lot of positive support, and that's even some unusual sources. There has been a tremendous amount of negativity. So I can imagine one being surprised in either direction. So what are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts are anyone who's surprised has not opened the history book. That's it. I mean, the script is already written. We keep seeing the same script over and over and over again. This is nothing new. I mean, it happened in the Greek Empire. It happened in the Roman Empire. It happened in the Nazi Empire. It happened in ancient Egypt. It's the same story. You have a very powerful empire who, grows and grows in power and influence until the point that their power and influence goes straight to their head. And then morality goes out the window. And when morality goes out the window, that society decides they don't want old school morality. They don't want the source of morality, which is the Torah. So they need to get rid of that Torah. How do they get rid of the Torah? They can't kill the person or the entity that created the Torah. What they can do is get rid of the messenger, and we are the messengers. So, as soon as morality goes out the window, anti-Semitism spikes. And as soon as anti-Semitism spikes, assimilation, we do the same thing. We say, no, Greeks, we're just like you. No, Romans, we're just like you. America, we're more liberal than you. We're the most liberal people in America. We're just like you. And then that empire as a collective says to us, no, you're not just like us. Let me show you that you're not just like us. We have this tool, we call it anti-Semitism. Let me show you that you're not just like us. And then it hits the fan. And so we know the script. I think the only thing that should surprise anyone is that anyone's standing by us at this point. It's the oldest hatred in the world, the hatred of the Jews. Just takes on a new mask in every generation. And this generation's mask is anti-Zionism, but it's the same old hatred.
Very well said. I mean, I really appreciate your clarity there. And very direct and right to the point. And who could disagree? Who could argue? And especially in the framework of history, I mean, it's chilling, when you put it that way, when you're as blunt as you're being, but which is what we love about you in general, I think, is, your straight talk, but you're absolutely 100% right. And on that note, what is your opinion about President Biden and how the Biden administration has been reacting? And there have been some very good people. I think we would agree. John Kirby, I mean, he has been very, very positive. But overall, the Biden administration, what are your thoughts?
So, I'm conflicted. I'm not really conflicted, but, there's two, let's call it opposing outlooks on this. On the one hand, there's a concept of gratitude and hakaras hatov, and, relatively speaking, they've had our backs, and, we have to be thankful for that, obviously. Having said that, anybody who thinks that love is unconditional or that they really, really have our backs versus they just have their own interests in mind is, again, not paying attention. So, whether it's going to happen tomorrow or in a week or in a month, eventually the Biden administration is going to say to Israel, that's it, enough, cease fire. And hopefully our leaders in Israel will have enough courage to give Biden, raise a certain finger, And when that happens, Biden's not going to be happy, and that will be the end of that. And so, this relationship that we have with the United States that's lasted this long has been a beautiful relationship, but I think we all know it's coming to an end. And so, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's happening tomorrow or in a week, but I have zero doubt whatsoever that support and love is conditional. And as soon as that condition dissipates, the love will dissipate, and we will no longer have a relationship with the Biden administration. I hope it. Listen, I hope we could, at least have the flexibility to have their backs until we win the war. But I'm skeptical. I'm not sure that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my fear from day one. The question is how long they hold out. And obviously they're under enormous pressure, political pressure from voters, pressure from Muslim groups, money pressure, financial pressure. Now they feel it on both ends of the Biden administration. But I totally agree with you. It's been my fear from day one is how long can it hang on? And like you said, is there some point where Israel buckles under the pressure? They still haven't gotten that $14 billion. They've been talking about it for months. They've been fighting about it. It's a political football where each politician is using it, exploiting it to get their own agenda through, their own narrative passed through, but which is disgraceful by itself in its own right. But yeah, that's the fear. Well, how well will the Israelis' response be? Because forgetting anything else, there's a lot of financial support is at stake, and there were two recent stories, of course. President Biden in that fundraiser, he privately slammed the Israeli government. He recounted conversations with Netanyahu. He said very bizarre things, by the way, that you're probably aware of. That he said that he told Bibi Netanyahu we should not have gone into Afghanistan after 9/11. I mean, I know Biden, the cognitive functioning is not all there, but that's pretty shocking. And then there's a story in the Wall Street Journal that Biden's policies are directly endangering IDF soldiers. This to me was very, very frightening because it makes sense. There has been an uptick in the amount of deaths that are happening, which every life is precious, every civilian life, certainly every soldier's life. I mean, these superhuman people had, going into literally this war zone. And supposedly the Israelis are not, according to the Wall Street Journal, that the Israelis are not able to clear out to use airstrikes because Biden's pressuring them to be more tactical, be more surgical in their strikes. And that has led to more soldiers on the ground dying. Did you see that?
I did. And it's only a surprise to those who are not paying attention. You can't help but laugh. You look at these things and it's just like, where are your brains? Like, and the list is long, but it's just a crazy thing to see how the world completely lost its moral compass in 2 months, right? It took years in Germany to go from dangerous rhetoric to the extermination of Jews. Here, it took 2 months, and people are being beaten on the streets, and we know, and what's going on. So it's a very scary situation. But I think, on the one hand, obviously, we very much need that. We don't need it. It makes our life easier when we have the financial backing from the United States, but it also creates a codependency that is not healthy, and we're paying the price right now with dead soldiers. So, I'm not a military strategist or a prime minister who's able to say we should just cut ties with the United States and screw their money. I can't say that. I don't know if that's something that's even remotely realistic, but I do know that our dependency on the United States is long term very, very damaging.
Interesting. Wow, that's a very interesting take, and I totally think a lot of people would agree with you, especially now when the stakes are higher than we've ever seen in our lifetime. 2 a.m., IDF soldiers noted suspicious movements in the horizon in time of war. That would generally mean to open fire, but the IDF, being the IDF, walked to notice that it was a 4-year-old girl walking aimlessly without shoes with multiple wounds. They took her to a field doctor, treated her wounds, helped her every way they could, brought her to humanitarian corridor, and it turns out the child was sent by Hamas into the heart of the war zone to see if Israeli soldiers were up and alert. Their cruelty knows. I mean, it makes you it's so heartbreaking and so incredibly moving, the story. And why don't you see the story in the press? Quoting you here, good question. If there's ever a story that illustrates the endlessly savage nature of Hamas, deeply compassionate nature of the IDF, that is it.
Director of a hospital in Gaza admitted straight up that since 2010 he's been a Hamas terrorist, and he admitted straight up openly that the hospital that he was the director of is being used as the Hamas terror base. It's reported nowhere. Like, you will not see this anywhere. And it's video. I mean, it's a video interview. You could watch the thing. The guy, nothing. Nobody reports it because, again, like, we know what gets clicks, and Jew hatred gets clicks. And if something, does not align with a person's agenda or the person's narrative that Israel is the oppressor, then they just won't report it. And that's what's going on. It's just blatant lies and hypocrisy, and it's terrible.
Absolutely, very well said. I've got to ask you about this, horrific, this unspeakable tragedy. I mean, it's unbearable. I mean, it's hard to even utter the words. But the IDF, of course, mistakenly killed 3 hostages. Number one, the more details that emerge, and it's horrific. I can't even imagine what the soldiers are going through. But the more details that emerge, we see. The situation is, even as much as we sort of do understand it, that they're sitting there, they're surrounded by the enemy, surrounded by terrorists, every single corner they turn. I don't care if their shirts are off. I don't care if they're not dressed, and if they're waving a white flag, they are dangerous. And there's booby traps. So, obviously the soldiers here are not at fault. At the same time, it's just so unthinkable. Now they're talking about, communication failures. And I'm just curious what your response is and what your thoughts is and how you even cope with such a story.
So, for me, on a personal level, given my background and my personal loss, my brother was murdered by Palestinian terrorists 5 years ago. And so, terror, generally speaking, triggers the heck out of me. Like, whenever there's an attack, it puts me into a very bad, dark place. And as you can imagine, October 7th, like you said, unbearable, but unbearable, exponentially more than any normal person.
All right. A final question before I ask you a little bit about your business and your personal things going on. The Red Cross. I mean, I talk about, disgraceful hypocrites. The Red Cross. It's unbelievable. And they, clearly have been exposed as total phonies. And it's amazing that there's not more pressure there. There's not more world pressure on the Red Cross, and the Red Cross themselves, have done, like they call them, a taxi cab service. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And I'm sure you're not surprised based on everything that you're saying right now. But it's just like mind-boggling.
It isn't, but it is not mind-boggling. That's the thing. It's only mind-boggling if you're not paying attention, right? Again, look at history, man. This is these organizations, like, we can't depend on these organizations. The second we need them for anything, they stab us in the back time and time again. The Red Cross could not care less. I don't know if you saw someone called the UNRWA offices yesterday and asked for funds for Israeli, families or whatever. And they're like, oh, we don't have funds for, only have funds for Palestinians. Like literally, that's what they said on the phone. The level of hypocrisy, the level of Jew hatred out there is just staggering, but unsurprising in any way, shape, or form. You just have to read history books. I mean, and by the way, when you read history books, you're not only going to learn about how much the world hates the Jews, you're also going to learn about how stupid we are as a nation. Time and time again. I mean, you go back to, ancient Egypt. Like we know this because we learned Torah our whole lives, but did you ever stop to think about the fact that after everything Hashem did for the Jewish people in Egypt, after the 10 plagues, after everything, 80% stayed back? Do you understand, like, what is wrong with us? Like, in the desert, God is doing these insane miracles. And he says, go into the land. What do? We send spies. What is wrong with us? We don't see what's in front of us. We don't learn from history. We don't recognize when God is yelling at us in a good way and throwing miracles and doing things, even today, this war, it's miracle after miracle after miracle. We just don't see it because we're just, I don't know, we're blind or something. It's a crazy thing to see, but most people don't know how to open a history book, which is just, it's unfortunate.